Hello, I'm Corey Hello, and welcome to another episode of Critimation, where I review animated TV shows and films. As always, I do not own any of these films or shows. They are properties of their respected owners. For today's episode of Critimation, I thought I'd try something different and do a character analysis. These will be more periodic and not as common as my usual reviews. And for the first of these, I will focus on Mertle Edmonds from the Lilo and Stitch franchise. Along with Yuki, Teresa, and Elena, Mertle is a member of Lilo's Hulu class. And for some reason, often antagonizes Lilo because of how different she is. With the support of her friends, Mertle refers to Lilo as Weirdlo, points out flaws in her life, and will even try to get her in trouble. And when Mertle herself makes a mistake, she blames Lilo for it. And while there were times that Mertle did show some compassion, such as at the dog show episode, she would often avoid spending time with Lilo, only being with her for personal gain, such as the episode with Mr. Stingy. Outside of the Hulu class, Mertle and Lilo were more like competitive rivals rather than friends. And while Mertle does often bully Lilo, she doesn't really think about the consequences of her actions. And when Lilo does apologize for how she responds to this, Mertle rejects the apology. But why does Mertle do this? Why must she make Lilo feel insecure about her uniqueness? Maybe there's a deeper meaning to Mertle's backstory than audiences realize. As shown in the episode Finder, Mertle reveals that she is unsure about how her posse thinks of her. And there were even episodes in which Myrtle's friends would actually leave her, but eventually come crawling back just for the sake of continuity. In addition, most of her family actually doesn't support her, except her mother, who would often throw extravagant parties and give her expensive gifts to the point of spoiling her. But strangely, we don't see her father. What we do know about him is that Mertle sees him as a role model, and even dedicated her festival dance in his honor by advertising for his store. On top of that, it appears that her behavior was based off his thoughts and beliefs that weirdos will never change. But it's the way she worded it that makes us wonder what exactly happened to him. And when Yuki points out that she didn't know Mertle had a father, Mertle snaps back at her. According to sociology today, children without fathers are more likely to have problems with friendships and behavior issues, as well as a higher chance of taking on an intimidated persona to hide their struggles and insecurities. This could have been what led to Mertle taking on her more cold and dominant leader-like role. And when Myrtle's father disappeared, either through death or divorce, Mertle failed to process her emotions, and instead acts out pushing everyone away and taking revenge on anyone who she feels wronged her. Self-loathing is indeed a common trait that children without fathers have. Oftentimes they feel abandoned. And Mertle may have taken on a more aggressive personality in order to feel in control over someone, to the point of attacking Lilo, who herself had lost both her parents. And while her father may have encouraged such behavior, once he was gone, Mertle subconsciously started bullying other kids just to feel better about herself, taking Lilo's kindness for granted, pointing out her flaws to make herself feel better, and rallying others to gang up on her and exclude her just to feel more in control. These are just my thoughts and opinions, and they do not justify Myrtle's actions towards Lilo. But I think the fact that she comes from a broken family herself really adds an extra layer to Myrtle's personality. And I often wonder what would happen if she and Lilo did become friends. It is implied that she reforms in Leroy and Stitch, just because of Gigi. And recently, on DeviantArt, I came across some fanfiction by user Doverstar, and it reminds me of the redemption arcs that we've been seeing in Rivals Turned Friends in Gravity Falls, The Owl House, and The Ghost and Molly McGee. And with your kind permission, I'd like to end this episode by doing a dramatic read of that very fanfiction. That Defining Moment by Doverstar. 16-year-old Mertle Edmonds didn't go barefoot anywhere unless she was in her room, especially not when every single pair of her sandals was in a designer brand. Unfortunately, tonight she had to make an exception. It was a performance celebrating the 50th anniversary of her hula school. Being only 2 years from graduation, Moses, their Kumu, had decided to allow his oldest students to star in a special dance they've all worked on together to celebrate. It was always easy working with Yuki, Teresa, and Ellen. It was even easy working with Victoria, mostly. But Lilo Pelique, always had the worst ideas, the weirdest ideas. She was always trying to stink up the show, steal the spotlight. Luckily, Moses didn't approve of half her plans during the brainstorming, and the dance came out okay. In fact, Mertle had shown out more than she usually did tonight. She did her part perfectly. The swing of her hips, the smoothness in her step, the waft in both arms. Not a single slip-up, and not a curly hair came out of her ponytail. And of course, doing hula required she go barefoot. That made total sense. What was really not like her was running through the muddy trail down to the beach without shoes on. She didn't intend to, but she had to get out of that building. Her mother had been there to congratulate her after the performance. As always, Moms gushed a lot. At least Mertle could say, with confidence, that her mom wasn't doing it just because she was her mom. It was because, obviously, Mertle deserved every bit of the praise she received. When Mertle had gone to change into her green tank top and blue cut-off jeans after the audience had all but left, she took her sweet time. It was even better that she got to go to the only bathroom right before Lilo had, so she got to see the sweet flash of irritation in those two close-together brown eyes. Even that blue thing, Stitch, looked vexed. Mertle had been telling herself for years that she didn't even know exactly what Stitch was, even if certain events during her childhood proved otherwise. Events and a talking dog who was probably asleep in her bedroom right now. If Victoria had gone home so quickly after the show, she probably would have been annoyed for her creep friend too. Some nights just went too perfectly. Upon emerging from the bathroom, the redhead found that everyone was staring at her. As well they should. She looked great. But it was a different kind of staring. There was something really concerning in the way Teresa was practically biting her lip off and the way Moses seemed to be struggling to speak. What? Mertle tossed her ponytail, hands on her hip. What'd I miss? Her mother, eyes strangely puffy, pushed past Moses to put her hands on her daughter's shoulders. Miss Edmonds' glasses looked foggy. Mertle, sweetheart. Was she getting all choked up? Why? Mo's eyes cut to Elena and Yuki and back to her mom. How embarrassing. Whatever it was, couldn't it wait until they got out of the hula first? Nobody liked the blabbler. totally unprofessional. Her mom has always been just a little over emotional with, well, basically anything, and it got old fast. Mom, everyone's looking. What? It's Carl. It's your daddy, Myrtle. Words blurred after that. Something about a phone call. Something about missing the show tonight. Something about driving under the influence. Myrtle heard it. She just didn't register what exactly had happened in the last 30 minutes. Her daddy couldn't be gone. There was no way. He was rich. He owned a store, a resort, 3 convertibles. He was too important to be dead. As Myrtle looked around, past her hysterical mother and the remaining faces in the room, all she could hear was her own heartbeat. Everyone was still watching her. Why were they watching her? She didn't want to be watched. She didn't want all the attention now. Not now. Couldn't they take a hint? Wasn't this one of those times where everybody was supposed to go away? Or just not be here? She hated the way they were all gawking at her. Her daddy was gone. What did that mean? Myrtle felt it slowly sinking in further and further. Carl was dead. He died just a moment ago. He was here then, and now he wasn't. Her face tingled. She knew she was about to cry, and she totally hated people seeing her cry. Did cry often. She wanted her mom to give her one of those too tightly, really unnecessary, unwanted hugs, but everyone seemed frozen, even Miss Edmonds. In that split second, Myrtle looked at Teresa. Teresa looked away. Then Edna. She fiddled with her hair and glanced at the wall. Yuki met her glance, just for a moment, and then she started fidgeting with her hula skirt, eyes downcast. The only person who stared right back at her was Lilo. Lilo was unamusingly waiting for Myrtle to look at her, and the sympathy was there. Sympathy that was so clearly genuine was almost enough to make teenage Edna's gag. The big-eared freak at Lilo's side seemed just as stunned, but Myrtle blatantly ignored that particular detail. Without another word, she pushed past her mom, Moses, her classmates, and bolted out the open door into the warm night air. So there she was, barefoot, running through the slightly damp path through the tropical woods to... She didn't know where. Maybe the beach? Not home, no thank you. Myrtle wanted to be alone, where those morons at the hula couldn't find her and stand around being useless again. She didn't know what she wanted them to do. Something? Hello? Funny. She always knew what she wanted. Well, she knew what she did not want. What she didn't want was basically everything they'd just done. A whole lot of nothing. Nothing. That's what they all were, after all. Right? All of them. They were nothing. Not as important as she was. Not as talented. Not as pretty. What had she expected? It possibly wasn't supposed to be a hug or a kind word. They never mattered that much in her world before, except when she needed someone to yell at or to agree with her. So why did their actions back there matter now? She was out of breath already? Really needed more exercise. Was it a dazzling hula career enough? Okay, maybe not a dazzling career. Not yet. But someday. And practicing for it was clearly wearing her poor, hard-working body thin. She paused, hands on her knees, gasping for breath. She must be tired from the incredible show she just put on. That was it. Not out of shape at all. No way. Not her. Someday she would have a dazzling hula career, and she'd be a sensation. And then... Dad won't make it to any more of my shows. The thought crushed down on her like the waves she heard beating the surf off to her right, somewhere past the trees and the palmitos. The weight of what she had learned just moments ago was finally starting to make her ache. And Mertle slumped against the trunk of a palm tree. Tears ran down her nose, and she felt herself sliding down the trunk, hugging her knees as she crouched in the sand. Moonlight trickled through the branches and stars crinkled in the clear sky. Mertle did spend a bunch of time outside, unless it was a weekend. She might have enjoyed the night wind playing with her ponytail, if her daddy wasn't dead. He used to visit when she was little, when she was 5, 8, even once when she was 10. He'd bring her expensive gifts from his store in Honolulu. She wore a bungee that he had given her now, right above the old charm bracelet on her wrist. It said, "Daddy's Little Princess," in letters that used to be hot pink. She had been young enough then that being a princess seemed an achievable goal. Here in the present, it was for luck, or maybe to remind herself he existed, because until today, she hadn't heard from him in 3 long, disappointing years, hadn't seen him in 5. Why was he gone? She needed him. Without Carl in the world, she felt it was like she wasn't even special anymore. Like she wasn't important. Like she wasn't a star. Her daddy, when he had bothered to show up or call or write or send her presents, had managed every time to make her feel like she was somebody. She believed it too, to this very night, because he told her so often when they were together. He told her how amazing she was, and how lucky, because she had him for a father, and he could give her anything. Not to mention a mother whose job gave them whatever they didn't already have. Now there was nobody to remind her how incredible she was. How incredible she just had to be. She would start to think it was all a lie. And she was just an ordinary and witless as any one of those girls in that stupid school, because the one person in the world who believed it as much as Mertle had was on the side of a road somewhere, never to open his eyes again. "It's not fair," Mertle sobbed. "It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair." She jumped when she heard someone behind her. Mertle? Mertle thumbed the moisture out from underneath her glasses. "Go away." "I know how." "I said go away," wailed Lo. Lilo was quiet as she slipped her yellow duffel bag off her shoulder, letting it drop in the sand, kneeling beside the redhead. She was in Kanaka shorts and a red top with white sleeves. Must have changed while Mertle had been running. It looked hideous on her anyway. "I know how you feel," Lilo said almost neutrally, going on as if Mertle hadn't snapped at her. Mertle refused to turn and look at her. She so did not need this. Not right now. And not from it. "You? Please! Don't make me laugh." "I do," Lilo insisted. "You're probably really confused." She crossed her legs to get more comfortable. "And scared." Her voice got lower, and she looked at the hands in her lap. "And lost." Mertle rolled her eyes, but that made hot tears spill faster down her cheek, and she rubbed them off angrily, worried makeup would smear. "What do you know?" "I know you're really gonna miss him. You talk about him a lot." "Yeah, right," Mertle scoffed, almost laughing for real then. "He wasn't even a good dad. He was never here. Why should I care?" "But he was still your Ohana, right? Still your dad." Mertle was quiet for a second, contemplating that. Yeah, he was still her dad. Still, what kind of dad up and leaves for the big city when you're 2? Or stays away for years at a time, just so he can expand some dumb store? But he'd come by every once in a while. He'd take her out to get some of Lukey's shaved ice. He'd watch her surf. He'd even taken her to get her ears pierced. And when she picked out her first pair of earrings and held them up to him, 2 little diamonds, he told her that they were dull compared to. Mertle felt her chest heave again, and she turned her body further away from Lilo to shield the mess she was obviously becoming. Worthless. She was worthless now, because she didn't even have a whole family anymore, let alone someone to tell her otherwise. Stupid man. Why had he done this to her? What was he thinking? Had he been thinking of her as he died? Had he been scared? He'd been all alone. Lilo put her hand on Myrtle's shoulder, and the bespectacled puddle finally craned her head around to glance at her. "Why are you doing this?" Mertle demanded, sniffing, voice harder than she thought it would be. Lilo did retract her hand. "I lost my dad too," she reminded the girl. "I know what it's like right after." She did finish that part, closing her eyes as if going back in time for a moment. Lilo sighed very softly, and Mertle thought she'd never hear someone sound so beaten down. Then she opened her eyes and caught Myrtle's glance again. "Anyway, I didn't want you to be by yourself." She managed a smile. "Nobody gets left behind." Mertle gawked at her. She gawked at Lilo Peleke plenty of times. Dozens. Hundreds. All the times they've known each other. Mertle looked down her nose at Lilo. She sneered and called her names for over 10 years. When they were children, the Edmonds child's sole purpose in life had been to make her rival miserable, because if someone else could be miserable, Mertle wouldn't have to be. This raven-haired, brown-eyed native teen was a freak, an oddball, a dork, a loser, a total ignorant, defied Myrtle's lifelong picnic. Lilo was gross, loud, weak, had a terrible taste in fashion. And she was the only one who stayed. Yuki, Teresa, Elena, they all looked away. But Lilo had shown some compassion. Lilo had stared back, because something of a murder had happened to Mertle. Something that mattered. She'd run after the girl who had tried to drag her down with every breath she had taken since they were 5 years old. She acted like Mertle was important, like she cared, like they were friends. And slowly, through her tears, Mertle smiled back. Thanks for tuning in to Critimation. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter, or support me on Patreon. I'm open to suggestions, and I will see you next time.